Hi guys, today we're going to answer 3 questions that I thought were super thought-provoking. The first one being, what are 5 key values you hold and why are they relevant to your life as an employee? And to that I would say that my first value is integrity. To me this means being honest and always trying to do the right thing even if nobody is watching. And as a Starbucks barista, I can definitely say that integrity is a big part of my job. Because this includes accurately charging orders, making drinks correctly, and admitting my mistakes. Additionally, I came to realize the importance of this value after learning about how organizations like Coca-Cola and H&M often prioritize profit over environmental ethics by participating in greenwashing, which, if you didn't know, is when companies exaggerate or mislead consumers about how environmentally friendly they really are. In many cases, they use selective disclosure by only highlighting positive environmental claims and while also hiding the harmful impact of their practices. Netto 2020. The second value I hold is respect. Working as a barista, respect is super important, especially in regards to interacting with customers, my coworkers, and especially my managers. That being said, I also believe it's not just the worker's responsibility to uphold respect, but the company's as a whole. When it comes to corporate social responsibility, organizations have an ethical responsibility to respect workers' basic human rights and provide them with safe working conditions. Which brings me to the idea of the fast fashion industry and sweatshops, because I think it's important that we learn how large companies like Nike exploit workers and treat them as a means to an end. One specific example that comes to mind is the documentary I watched in one of my classes called A Decent Factory, where we saw how the workers were exposed to unsafe conditions, long hours, verbal abuse, and unfair wages, which just overall demonstrated a complete lack of respect for the employees. My third value is accountability, because as a barista, again, it's important that I hold myself accountable to stuff like food safety, being on time, and making drinks to standard, because my actions can affect both my coworkers and customers. That being said, this reminds me of the BP oil spill, because if you didn't know, instead of helping the affected communities and repairing environmental damage, the company BP focused heavily on protecting its public image through advertisements and public relation campaigns, while millions of gallons of oil continued to leak in the Gulf of Mexico. So in the end, BP ended up losing public trust and creating greater damage to their own reputation. As such, this scandal, I think, is a great example of why accountability is an important value, especially for organizations, because leaders and companies should openly acknowledge their mistakes and communicate honestly with the public. Moving on, my fourth value is empathy. In general, working in customer service, you never really know what someone else is going through. So when I sometimes get rude or frustrated customers, I've learned not to take it personally. As such, I greatly value empathy because it helps me stay calm and react kindly instead of negatively when it comes to these interactions. I would say that empathy is very important within organizations as well, because the way people communicate with each other can affect the overall work environment. And me personally, as an autonomous individual, I'm responsible for my own ethical behavior, and in my case, empathy helps me make the more ethical decision of responding with patience and understanding to customers. Lastly, I value courage. At my job, even when I feel nervous or uncomfortable, I still try my best to respectfully communicate concerns instead of just staying silent when something seems a little odd. And it's especially nerve-wracking for me when I bring up problems to my shift lead or manager because of the power imbalance. But I've learned that speaking up is important for creating a more honest and supportive work environment. That being said, I think courage is a very important value that many whistleblowers have, as it's often difficult for employees to report the wrongdoings of their own company, whether it's internal or external whistleblowing. The Edward Snowden scandal was a great example of how speaking up about unethical practices came with some major personal consequences, but it also helped bring public awareness to government surveillance, and it sparked important conversations about privacy. Moving on to the next question, how is communications related to your values? To that, I say that communication is connected to all of my values because the way I communicate with others reflects the type of person I want to be. For example, honest communication reflects integrity because it requires me to be sincere and true. Meanwhile, active listening reflects respect and empathy because it allows the people I talk to feel heard and understood. Meanwhile, being transparent reflects accountability because it involves me taking ownership of my mistakes instead of hiding them. And lastly, speaking up when something feels wrong, again, reflects courage because oftentimes it's the hard, but it's the right thing to do. And ultimately, I would say that communication plays a major role in organizational ethics because, as we saw with the Tylenol cyanide poisoning crisis, which if you haven't heard, they listened to customers' concerns, recalled their products, and took accountability, which in the end ultimately helped the company rebuild public trust and strengthen its own reputation. Lastly, to answer the question about if there are any tensions between my values and organizational goals, I would definitely say yes. At my job, during busy rushes, us baristas are expected to maintain high beverage quality while also producing drinks as quickly as possible. However, these two expectations are often hard to balance. Because of this pressure, I sometimes rush through drinks, skip small quality checks, and avoid remaking a drink unless a customer complains, simply to keep customer wait time low and maintain productivity. As such, there are moments where, again, doing the right thing is not always easy, which is where my values of integrity and accountability sometimes clash with the company's goals. Because if it were up to me, I'd rather take the time to do things correctly and ethically. Lastly, I feel like this overall experience of mine connects to the Montgomery and DeCaro 2001 performance management perspective because at Starbucks, efficiency and short wait times are the behaviors that receive the most praise and recognition, while slowing down to ensure everything is perfect often goes unnoticed. So this puts pressure on employees like me to prioritize speed over quality. So overall, I would say that ethical behavior is not shaped by individual values, but by the environments and communication systems that organizations create. And moving forward, I hope to continue carrying these values into future workplaces and organizational environments. Thank you.